Hello. Uh, I'm going to continue with the book that I show you. I have done, you see it? Don't know. I have done two videos on this. The first one was an introductory one. The second was about well, just in case you didn't see it. First of all, Stiff Upper Lip by Alex Renton. Secret Crimes and the Schooling of a Ruling Class, and that's specifically about the British ruling class. From about 300 years ago, he tells the history of the school and how they educate the children. The children of the elite go to these schools called in England public schools, but they're private and fee paying and it's just the elite really that goes there in the old days to prepare them for running the empire. I suppose that today to prepare them for running the empire, a different kind of empire, but empire nevertheless. Okay, so in the first one, it was an introduction to the whole book, and I told you that the reason why I was taking time doing this is because of a personal issue. And that is because these schools, which are for the elite of the elite, all right, contrast markedly with my own experience, which was a boarding school too, but it was for the poor and the abandoned. There's a way for that, but I'm tired of saying it. Okay, so I just thought, is there something in common? Because obviously, a little boy at the age of 8 or at the age of 6, he doesn't know, the difference. Uh, so, do we have anything in common about the experiences? Yeah, that is why it interested me. So the first was an introduction to the book, and I told you about a few things that were different then. I'll put the videos at the back, okay, at the end of this video, so that you can find it if you're interested. The second was something that is particularly associated with the public schools in England. But of course, as I told you, in my own institution with nuns, nothing, nothing at all, nothing at all. And it was to do with sexuality and how young boys are, I suppose we now say groomed or whatever it is, but quite a lot of sexual abuse of children by teachers, by masters, and by the boys themselves. Yeah. And I also told you that I asked my brother, one of my brothers, who also went to an orphanage for boys run by the Salesian brothers. Because I thought, well, perhaps it didn't happen at all where I was, because boys and girls are different. Men's sexuality is different from female sexuality. I mean, there are marked differences there. And I asked him, and I reported on that. He said, well, absolutely not. But the most important thing is that the boys were markedly separated by age in different groups, and you couldn't go from one group to the other. In other words, the little ones, 6, I don't remember how he defined the ages, but the little ones from the age of 6 until 9 or 8 or something like, they were in one part of a building. The other ones up to the age of 13 were in another part. The bigger ones, after 14, 15, in a different place. And he said absolutely prohibited to go from one place to the other. You were not a little one was never supposed to be found in the big ones, in the big boys' rooms, or vice versa. And I shared this with you in the previous video. Okay, so I dealt with that specific issue of sexuality and how most of them perhaps experienced sexual interactions with members of their own sex, yeah, which then you have to go on and say, okay, what happens next? All right, so in this, the part 3, I'm going to deal not with the worst part of it, which is the physical sadism that can actually occur, but just the more psychological aspect of it. When, as the author says, when you are dropped off. Dropped off. Amazing because where was it? The adjustments, what they call the settling in, which can be, he describes it not only because of his own research, but also of what many writers have written about it. And they all remember that first separation. My brother remembers the first when he was dropped off, and he saw my mother and my aunt sort of when they turned round and they left the building, and both my brothers started crying and so on. Okay. However, the attitude to the new boys was very different then. They had boys of their own age just becoming friendly and trying to help them and so on. My brother said that he became one of those whenever a new boy was brought in, that he was, just making him feel a little bit better, knowing that he's going to cry for a while and so on. This, I find it different in scale. A quote from J.M. Barrie, Peter Pan, from The Little White Bird. He says, on attaining the age of 8 or thereabout, children fly away from the gardens and never come back. The boys have gone to Pilkington's. He is a man with a cane. Note here, Pilkington was a prep school headmaster. He became the model for the villainous Captain Hook of Peter Pan. The author says a little bit about his first day at school, which I read in the introductory video. I want to move on from the novelist William Thackeray. He says, the author says, the first boarding school boy to describe the arrival was the novelist William Thackeray. In 1817, age 5, and accompanied by his 4-year-old cousin, he left his parents in Calcutta to go to boarding school in Southampton. This was quite normal practice for the children of British colonials. In the 1930s, my aunt and her sister, also in India, were dispatched to board at the ages of 4 and 6. In 1860, with dozens of new boarding schools opening, Thackeray was still ruminating on the effect of sending young children away from home. And these are his words. Perhaps I recollect, he's writing in 1860, perhaps I recollect driving down with a certain trunk and carpet bag on the box with my own mother to the end of the avenue, where we waited only a few minutes until the whirring wheels of that Defiance coach were heard rolling towards us, as certain as death. Twang goes the horn, Up goes the trunk, down come the steps. Ah, I see the autumn evening. I hear the wheels now. I smart the cruel smart again. And, boy or man, have never been able to bear the sight of people parting from their children. Now, Thackeray used his experiences at the succession of brutal schools in his fiction. In private letters, he told of years where his only hope lay in dreams of his mother. That first night at school, hard bed, hard words, strange boys bullying and laughing and jarring you with their hateful merriment. As for the first night at the strange school, we most of us remember what that is, he wrote in a magazine article. I wonder if some of the fathers who avoided taking their children back to school did so not through indifference, but for fear of the memories the trip might trigger. The first insult remains vivid, just as key to the narrative as the first arrival, like being searched on arrival in a prison, or the initiation rituals for army recruits. A violent affront to justice or normality drives the transition from the familiar to the new. Talking about very small children, yeah? I think the school knew our spirits had to be broken, a correspondent writes. Often the stories are of the shock of bad food, the clot of cold fat, the incomprehensible meat, outraged hunger. These are usually told looking back as comedy. But familiar, edible food, as any parent knows, is central to a child's comfort. I don't remember very much about my food, the food that we ate. I remember, I don't think it was specifically good or specifically bad. I just don't remember it at all. I do know that for breakfast we had a cup of coffee, which was really milk with a little bit of coffee, I suppose, and a piece of bread. And I do remember Saturdays. Saturdays was always lentils day with eggs. Lentils and eggs. I do remember that every Saturday. I don't remember anything else. Not really. I remember once playing with peas and throwing them. I have no recollection of the food at all. Anyway, okay. I do have recollections of the dining room, though, and the things we used to get up there. But perhaps perhaps later. The first bedtime stands out too. At home, it was a time of stories and hugs, of warmth and security. At Ashdown, that's the school where he went to, at Ashdown, bed was not safe or warm. After lights out that first night, the dormitory captain explained that the belt would be used not just to punish for crying, but for any noise at all, including a creak from a bed spring. It is not just the fear, but the affront that adults remember. I arrived at Hazel Grove House preparatory school in 1958, aged 8 years, writes one of my correspondents. His words, my first night highlight was having all the toy cars I had put on my dormitory bed to share and play with, all of them thrown out of the window. Another new boy started on the same day as me with a bedwetting problem. A little sympathy would have helped him. The matron angrily ripping his urine-soaked sheet off his bed one morning, rubbing his tear-stained face in it, didn't help. My goodness, okay. Okay, so this little boy got there to school with all his toy cars, yeah. We didn't have any toys. No one had any toys, so no problem there. So that is not applicable. The bedwetting, yeah. The bedwetting, I remember there were, was it two or three girls who wetted the bed every day for a while, then it stopped. And some girls would, me included, every now and then you would wet the bed. But I remember that at one point, I don't know whether I was wetting the bed more than usual or not, but I remember the one of the bigger girls would wake us up in the middle of the night and say, "You have to go to the bathroom," and we all had to go to the bathroom, and that was it. And then we went back to bed, and that was it. I remember that. Then I also remember that sometimes if you had an accident like that, you didn't want anyone to see it. So you just made your bed so to quickly, you just hid it. The problem was that the stain was there, you see, and the stain is clearly visible. And for some reason, it's always round at the end, for some reason. So if you had that accident, then you had the next 7 days or whatever it was, I don't remember, trying to make your bed in a certain way so that no one would see the stain. So yes, bedwetting. Yeah, I have more on bedwetting later. Okay. Um, but my goodness, actually putting your urine soaked sheet of his took it out from his bed, the matron, and actually rubbed his tear-stained face with it in it. The adults were often, I don't remember anything like that. That didn't happen at my place. I can assure you that they never beat us up, which I see the beatings here, horrendous. They didn't even shout. They don't need to shout. They didn't need to shout. It's totally different. In any case, the adults were often more avid than the children in the ritual of shocking the novices. The actor Selina Cadell told me of her first day at Bedales in 1961, aged 8. Quote, my first memory as I watched my parents drive away, unsure of when I would see them again, my first memory was of the matron of the girls' dorms handing me a tall glass of milk. Minutes before this, my mother had answered her question. The question was, is there anything Selina doesn't like? And her mother answered, milk. Assuming, of course, that she had somehow misunderstood, I gently explained that milk made me sick. I don't care what it does. You will not leave this room until you drink it, came the response. I started to drink slowly. To my surprise, the matron produced a pair of scissors at this point and started to cut off my hair. It was quite long. She cut it quite short. I was sick on the carpet. I had to clear up the mess, the vomit and my hair, before I was taken to my dorm. I cried all night, that first night, but the abuse I received and the threat of violence from the bullies in my dorm soon altered that. My crying went inside. That is cruel. That exercise of power from, the other bigger girl. Something like that happened to me. Well, nothing to do with, not cruel. I do remember once, but it was because we were supposed to eat everything that was on the plate. Everything always had a little bit of a moral at the end of it. So remember, you probably heard this, children in Africa starving and okay, so uh, we had to eat everything on the plate. Throwing food away was just not. I think they saw it, the nuns, I think they saw it as immoral or something. It was wrong. So anyway, I didn't like tomatoes. I never did. And she said that I had pushed the tomatoes, to the side of the plate. And she said, eat those. And I said, I don't like tomatoes. She said, you have to eat everything on your plate. And I had to eat them. I started eating them and I started vomiting. And she took the plate away, and that was it. I never had to do it again. But she didn't punish me. She didn't shout at me. She didn't know. But it does produce a certain. I have never ever eaten a tomato after that. When I had to put it in my mouth and I vomited, never again. I can eat tomato sauce or something like that, but a raw, never again. But anyway, she didn't insist and she didn't punish me and I never had to eat them again. So that was different. Okay, Thackeray's memoir stands out not just because he was the first to tell the story, but because, unlike many of the others, he stood by his experience. Most memoirists of school days use the harsh stories of their first days or years as an antiphon, the necessary necessary prelude to happier times. And I don't know what's happening today. The necessary prelude to happier times. It makes for a neat plot and tells how we mature and learned not to complain, to despise self-pity. But Thackeray never used the wry humor of and self-deprecation that colors so many of those accounts. He does not gloss the misery or turn it into something useful. There are some stories of children bouncing into the school with a joy that never deflated, but it seems clear that there were few children for whom the first separation was not an elemental shock. The parting is a necessary rite in life's journey, obviously enough. A door closes, another opens. Separations are the pivots in the great Victorian novels that fed the imagination of 20th century British children. For the many people who now look back in pain or wonder at childhood spent with strangers, that initial forced severing is the beginning of a story that decades later, many, including me, he says, are still trying to unravel and understand. In the chapter 5 in, let me see. Chapter 4, the brick parent. From child development psychologist John Bowlby in 1973. I wouldn't send a dog to boarding school at age 7. That is the age he went to school. The first thing that a child psychiatrist or a psychotherapist looks at today when taking on a troubled child as a patient is their attachment pattern. That's what they call it, attachment pattern. It's a simple principle of bonding between an infant and a trustworthy carer that is the core to modern beliefs about how to grow an emotionally healthy person. Attachment to a primary figure is essential to good childhood development. Without, worry and anxiety tend to rule the psyche, says a standard textbook. If the child has been in and out of care, or parents have been absent, violent, or unreliable, a diagnosis of avoidant or disorganized attachment may be made. Or something else will take the place of the mother there. Because it's a well-acknowledged problem, the theory of attachment has dominated child development science for 50 years now, and there is much that can be done. The first step is to enable the child to talk about their anxiety or their anger, to understand what triggers them to hit children in the playground or fear of going home. Not making a good attachment can be catastrophic. Quote, insecure attachment is a lifelong risk factor for problems with learning, relationships, later parenting, and career choices, as well as for issues with emotional and mental well-being, says Robin Balberney, a psychotherapist who advises government on early years policy and has served on the front line in local child and adolescent mental health services. The people who step in and do something when a child starts smashing up a classroom or arrives on Monday covered in bruises, for example. Unlike most in his profession, Balburney uses vivid language, even in formal submissions to parliamentary committees. Quote, in the very worst case of insecure attachment, the child's personality becomes organized around survival rather than love. This disorganized attachment is the most severe type of insecure attachment. There is no coherent internal working model beyond a hair-trigger stress response, just messy sediments of past grief, fear, and confusion. Quote, with inmates of prisons, the care system or mental institution, with inmates of prisons, the care system or mental institutions, poor attachment in early life is almost always an issue. Depression and substance dependency are linked too. There are those who challenge the overwhelming dominance of attachment theory, especially as revelations about genetics tell of more and more character traits that are coded into us at birth, indicating that nature may be more important than nurture. But new advances in neuroscience are also giving more weight to attachment now. It is already widely accepted that children who have suffered abuse and related trauma will show differences in the volume of their brain from the normally treated child. These have been spotted by neuroimaging in parts of the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala, and the hippocampus. Another technique has shown neural network abnormalities. A new discipline, neuropsychology, has arisen from this work. Neuropsychological studies of the children damaged in these ways found suggestions of a range of problems. For example, deficits in IQ, memory, working memory, attention, response inhibition, emotion discrimination. The last resonates with attachment theorists. Poor emotional regulation being a classic symptom of disorganized attachment. Anyway, psychologists talk about the limited emotional intelligence, the paucity. I don't know the limited emotional intelligence. I suppose for some, I don't think that they can generalize. I'm reading rather quickly here, but I don't think they can generalize on that, because if they are responding, the children are responding to a feeling of abandonment or loneliness, or yes, of course, some will end up being criminals. Yes, limited emotional intelligence. Others will become very, very sensitive. And that is not limited emotional intelligence at all. Actually, I think it's the opposite. I think it's the I don't know, I think it's the opposite in my own case, but I think that of my friends too. I think we developed, perhaps it was just survival, but to develop a certain sense of you can read the person immediately. Perhaps it's because we were really little you can, I've spoken about this ages and ages ago. You're like a little puppy. You develop a sense of almost vibes from the person that is with you or the person you don't know. You can almost read the person right away. It's something that you develop. I think it's survival. Whatever it certainly is emotional intelligence. So I think they're just dealing here with people who will uh, never mature emotionally, I suppose. That they have been so hurt that they want to hurt others, I suppose. Anyway, he's going through some studies here. Psychologists talk about the limited emotional intelligence, the paucity of the coping mechanisms of children who have suffered disorganized attachment. But it is a poor and dry jargon for something so elemental and so devastating. Learning that love is not reliable, that trust may be betrayed. Being told that you are loved does not count. The one who loves you has to prove it. More than to prove it, I think I spoke about this in my earlier video. More than proving it, I think is more what hurts the child is not loving him. If you are as I was in this particular situation, no one is loving you. I mean, no one is holding you. No one is really loving you. But you don't feel hurt because of the lack of love, because you don't know. I think what hurts the child is if you are in a position to give it, your mommy or whatever, you withdraw it and you don't. And that is what, it's not that he has, well, I suppose it's another way of putting it. It's not just to say, I love you, you have to prove it. Yeah. And the child senses very quickly if you are proving it or not. It's not a question of proving it as evidence, it's that the child knows if it's right or not, if you mean it, let's say, or not. It's the withdrawal of that the child senses, the absence. Yes. Okay, what else does he have? So many stories, we are left with stories. These, as we'll see, are powerful stories. There is a body of first-hand accounts going back to the 19th century with ample evidence from both parents and children that something momentous happened at the first separation. I never felt he was mine again, says a mother. The school took him from me. Another quote, I never again had a proper relationship with them, says an ex-boarder. For me, love and childhood, all that stuff, ended when I was 8. I have found no boarding school that considers attachment theory important or relevant, says the author. The Boarding Schools Association is not able to produce any psychologist who can rebut the clutch of adult emotional problems now known as boarding school syndrome. My goodness, there is such a thing. Boarding school syndrome. Yet the drive and power to attach were crucial long before the theory was voiced by John Bowlby. Core to the British boarding school system and to its brilliant effectiveness was the realization that if you took a child away at an early age from its family, like a puppy from a litter, their emotional needs and demands would be transferred to the school, their teachers, their fellow pupils, to the institution itself. Right. That is true. That is why the ancients, Plato and all the others always, and the Spartans, but the Spartans was only for 6 months or 3 months. No, but they take them away from their parents so that they can bond with this group. Yeah, that is true. The last, the institution, the last becomes what psychiatrists looking at institutionalized patients called the brick mother. As Balbirnie writes, in the course of human evolution, the natural methods of attachment behavior, the learning of social skills, the forming of identity, confidence, and self-esteem have often been put to the task of building group cohesion. This is going to be obviously very important for the upper classes. Group cohesion. He is one of us. He is sound. Yeah, that's going to be obviously more important than who your mother is. Well, family. And the school was the right mother of men, as a line from Glenalmond College School song has it. Oh, may continue. George Orwell went to public school. In chapter number 5, Ideal Upbringings, a quote from George Orwell. Your home might be far from perfect, but at least it was a place ruled by love rather than by fear. Your home, meaning my home, yeah. Your home might be far from perfect, but at least it was a place ruled by love rather than by fear, where you did not have to be perpetually on your guard against the people surrounding you. At 8 years old, you were suddenly taken out of this warm nest and flung into a world of force and fraud and secrecy, like a goldfish into a tank full of pike. I'm just wondering at those words, the words you were flung into a world of force and fraud and secrecy. I can honestly tell you that I didn't see force. I didn't see fraud. The secrecy, my experience is different. Anyway, everyone seems to know what an unhappy childhood is, but there is not much agreement about what makes a happy one. While researching this book, I asked every expert I spoke to, child psychologists, psychotherapists, trauma and abuse experts, psychoneurologists, child development writers, and of course teachers, for a definition, and got no good answer. One eminent psychologist said that the only valuable answer you can get is from the children themselves. So I asked mine, says the author. I asked mine their formulas for a happy childhood. The younger one, then aged 10, said, "It is knowing that you are loved and feeling safe and having enough of what you want." The older, 16, said, "Having an excellent Wi-Fi connection." By the way, that quote from George Orwell that came from Such Were the Joys, published in the American Partisan Review magazine in 1952. For fear of libeling the headmistress, Orwell's essay was not published in the UK until 1967. Child development science is, you realize, inexact. Not only is the shape of a good childhood hard for the experts to agree about, the notions of what it might be are under continual change. So is how important a happy childhood is to becoming a happy adult. And then there is the problem over where good and happy coincide with effective, or if they do at all. In Rachel Cusk's novel, Outline, a character repeats his mother's wisdom about the bitter sweetness of life. Quote, "There was no such thing as an unblemished childhood, though people will do anything to convince you otherwise." There was no such thing as an unblemished childhood, though people will do anything to convince you otherwise. This thought lies alongside the belief that an efficient, productive childhood needs a dose of hardship, some tough love. Here lie echoes of pre-Victorian notions of the innate evil of children, before reason and God have been beaten into them, my goodness. A headline over a recent piece in the women's section of the Daily Mail ran, quote, "Why a happy childhood can make you an unhappy adult." That was the headline. Why a happy childhood can make you an unhappy adult, with the writer blaming her comfortable suburban upbringing for her failures later. She quotes the broadcaster Kirsty Young. "I don't want my children to be happy. They will be bloody lucky if they glimpse it now and again. I want them to be content and have self-worth." Okay. I'm going to stop here because I have quite a lot to say about this. I think it's a question of definitions. I think it's a question. I'll need more time to deal with it, because otherwise this video is going to go on for too long. I think they are misunderstanding what it is meant by happiness here. This Kirsty Young saying, "No, I don't want my children to be happy." What she's actually, what they are talking really is about discipline. It's not about love or happiness. It's like, if you, as so many children grow up nowadays to have everything they want, kind of thing, okay? That they don't have to struggle for anything, then obviously they do not develop that what the Victorians wanted to. You don't develop either survival skills, or you're just going to sort of drown in a drop of water. Yeah. Any little 8-year-old kiddie in Yemen or Afghanistan is knows more about life than. Okay, so that's one thing, obviously, but in order to deal with that, I think you have to have a discipline at home. Yeah. So the disciplining of character. personality that will make you grow up as an adult. I need a lot more time for this. So I'm going to leave it here for today. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.